I am always moved and inspired coming to Italy, coming to Rome. I don't know if you know any of my history, but I used to be in Italy every year for 12 or 14 years in a row. Back in the 90s, I complained to my sponsor because he always put me in Milan. I love Milan too. I said, you got to put me in Rome more. So finally, I'm in Rome. Of the many countries I visit and speak at, I have different opinions and different pleasures, but I regard Italy my real home when I'm away from home. So it's a pleasure to be here. Now, I just came out with a book called Advancing the Common Good, and the reason I mention that is that I realize that my work, and maybe your work, has been about the common good. In other words, I'm an economist, and I'm in marketing as a specialty, and what's marketing about? I believe it was to raise the standard of living of the people in society, to raise the common good. Now, I know that a company is working to increase its own welfare, but it does it by increasing the common good, by giving us good products, good services, and so on. And sometimes we get blinded when we have to choose a policy, a strategy, when we're in government and have to choose a proposition, and we have to always ask, in my mind, which answer best serves the common good? That is, which answer increases better the lives of more people? So it's really my motivation. Now, I want to start with the idea of the history of marketing and what it's like today and what it's going to be like tomorrow. And I think I'll use let's see if we can get the material on here. I'm trying to communicate with the people. By the way, I can speak without pictures too, but I'll do my best. So here is the thing. This one? Yeah. Good. By the way, you'll notice it's the Italian edition of our book called 4.0, which I wrote, but I don't know, but I haven't read in Italian. I'm trusting it's done right. And for those of you who have already read 3.0, which is quite different, and this is 4.0, I want to warn you or satisfy you that 5.0 is almost finished. But 5.0 will deal with very high technology, and how marketing will be impacted by the Internet of Things. But what we're going to look at is, very briefly, what is marketing's history? When did it start? Secondly, to review today's marketing, and then to think about tomorrow's marketing. But I have to start with mentioning a very famous person, and that's Peter Drucker. Because my colleagues and I just came from Vienna. About 11 years ago, a gentleman from IBM, who was a very big fan of Peter Drucker, Peter being the father of management, decided to, 11 years ago, start a Peter Drucker Forum in Vienna. And he didn't expect it to be successful, and now it's almost turning out to be a threat to the Davos people, the World Economic Forum people, because it had a couple of thousand people in the 11th iteration, which I just came from. But who's Peter Drucker? Peter Drucker wrote maybe 30 books full of wisdom, which are continuously being reread by all managers because there are insights that we lose, we forget about, that come up when you read any of his books. The reason I'm mentioning it is that he was really the grandfather of marketing. He never called him that, but I would like to call him that because you could see in the 50s and 60s, he was already knowing and acknowledging the importance of marketing. So let me share some quotations. The first thing he said is that the most important two functions of business are marketing and innovation. He didn't have to say that. He could have said it's production, it's finance, it's human relations. No, marketing and innovation are the two most important functions. All the others are costs. You know what he's saying? He's putting down production, he's putting down finance. He's not saying that's unimportant, but they're not as important as the purpose of a company is to be good at marketing and innovation. Now, it's not enough to be good at only one. I mean, let's say you've got good talent in marketing, but nothing really to market. In fact, it's an average product. All right, good marketing will help you a little bit, but why don't you make a good, distinguished, special, unique product or service? So innovation is as important as marketing. And just to be an innovator without marketing is stupid. You'll be like the Philips Company. The Philips Company has a reputation of making new inventions all the time, which no one understands, thinks are overpriced, because they never made their products with any marketing help. See, when you're in development of new products, you're making what you think the market wants, but you didn't do any marketing to find out if they want it. All you're doing, you are the master of the possible. You imagine something possible, but you need the people who are masters of the valuable, the marketers, to know if it has value. So marketing and innovation must both be present in your company. Right now, we're working with an interesting company that illustrates this, and the company's name is Fujifilm. Now, you may say, Fuji's dead. I mean, did you buy any box, a green-looking box for your camera? Beautiful colored film? No, you can still buy it possibly, but Kodak and Fuji should be dead. By the way, Kodak is more than dead. It has a few remnants. Fuji is bigger than it was when it was Fujifilm. Now, there's a mythology there. You know the myth of the phoenix that dies and gets alive again? Well, Fujifilm you'll hear a little more about Fujifilm, but it is run by a marvelous leader who knew that there's so much technology in that company that when the film goes, there's other things to do. You can go into the medicine business and the health business and the cosmetics business. They have so many businesses now. Women, if you're worried about aging, they have one of the best anti-aging creams. And women, when you have to have an examination for your own good state of health, breast and so on, healthy breasts, they have the best way to see if you're problem-free with the film that they have developed. So I don't want to talk about one company, but I want to tell you what their motto is. And it makes the point that you must be good at both marketing and innovation. Their motto is never stop. And by that they mean marketing, both. Innovation, never stop. Marketing, never stop. Okay. So Peter Drucker, who said marketing and innovation must go together and run the business. He also said the purpose of a company is what? To create customers. It's as simple as that. And if you don't have that ability, don't go into business. Which really means you shouldn't just create them. You've got to love them. You've got to figure out something about them that would make them happier people. That's why it's about the common good. What marketing is about, trying to raise the lives of people, make them better lives. So another thing Drucker said is that the aim of marketing is to make selling unnecessary. Now watch out. When I tell this to management, they have a sales force too. And what does Drucker mean by saying that marketing is like the opposition of sales? Its aim is to make selling unnecessary. Namely, when you really succeed, you invent a product that people stand in line to buy. All you need are order takers. You do not need advertising people and brand work. You don't need any sales force, because you came out with the product that you know fits the customers because they're lining up to buy it. Just think of the Tesla car, the Tesla automobile. I mean, he doesn't have to do too much marketing. The talk does the marketing. Best marketing is word of mouth. Best marketing is your friend saying, I bought a Tesla and there's nothing like it. How do you, now we can't all, as companies, always come out with brilliant ideas, but there will be many ideas coming out like that, and Drucker reminded us that that's really what it's about. And I have a person who came up to me just before we got started, and he's writing a book on how to really create differentiation, how to really make your product special, different and special. And he has even a deck of cards that the group trying to figure out how to take either an existing product, which is like the others, to make it different, or to make a new brand and product different. So that's what the business is about. Okay, so let's move to the brief comments on the history of marketing. I want to first mention that let's separate the word sales and the word marketing, because too many people, when I used to come to Italy, would say, oh, Professor Kotler teaches selling. He's in sales. Well, I have a great respect for selling. That's an ability in itself. It's a gift to be able to sell well. But marketing is not selling. It's much more than selling. It uses selling. It has to. Selling is important. In fact, marketing really started to help the people who sell better, to know where the leads are, to know what to say to people who might buy your product. But the difference is this. Selling happened throughout history. Marketing didn't happen throughout history. That's kind of new. Adam and Eve. Eve convinced Adam to give the apple to Adam. And so sales goes way back in time. Marketing as a word was not used, it did not appear in a textbook title until the early 1900s. And the word market was around, not the word marketing, because in the Middle Ages there were markets. People had grown more tomatoes than they could consume themselves, and so they went and sat at the street level and sold or exchanged tomatoes for something that they wanted or for money. So markets are very, very old, and we know what they're like. Marketplaces. So marketing, to be coining that word, means read my book, not mine, but the writer would be saying, read it because you'll learn how to work with markets. You can do marketing. You're working with markets. Okay. Now, who wrote the first books in the 1900s on marketing? Ironically, they were all written by economists. So there's no separation really between being an economist and being a marketer, but these were economists who were unhappy with the state of marketing theory, of economic theory. Because when you go to MIT, as I did for my PhD, most of the economics was about price theory. You want to sell more? Lower the price. And those of us who were listening to that, we said there's more ways to get more demand than just to lower the price. I can raise the whole demand curve with advertising. I can get a salesman to get more demand from the market. So the first books on marketing were written by economists who were disillusioned with the emphasis on one P only, called price. And in addition, they wanted to talk about other things that make markets work better: wholesalers, retailers, agents, insurance companies, banks. In other words, there's a whole structure of demand creation that you have to understand. So those were the early books. Very thick, 600 pages, 800 pages. You'd learn a lot about the institutions that make up the marketplace. Now, let me go to the 1950s. I guess this summarizes pretty much what I said about it, that marketing emerged in the 1900s, and in the 1950s we had self-conscious marketing companies. And let me go to this, which gives you a little more detail. So in the, up until the 70s, I would say most companies defined themselves as product companies. I make cars. I make pharmaceuticals. And that's fine, but Procter & Gamble and other companies started to say, what's more important is what customers' needs does my company try to satisfy? And so there was a shift from only talking about the products you make to talking about the kinds of consumers you're trying to create, a la Mr. Drucker. My job is to create customers. And so I'll show you in a few slides a nice book that has good material on how to be customer-oriented. But another thing happened, and that's called branding. When I wrote my 1967 book on marketing management, I only gave 2 pages to branding. I knew it was important because we knew that what is the writer of a book doing? Charles Dickens. Well, he's branding his. You wait for the next book that Charles Dickens is going to write. He's a brand. Da Vinci's a brand, and so on. And so I said that branding came up because we used to be farmers, and we had cows, and we would put a hot brand on our cow so no one would take away our cow. But branding has become so major in the thinking now. And are you a strong brand? What can you do? And should you restrict the brand to what you originally put out as a product? Or should your brand be a platform? So not only do you make Dio soap, but you make Dio perfume maybe, and Dio this and Dio that. In other words, when you get a brand going, it's elastic. It could cover more, especially if you're going to have a larger product line. We'll say more about branding. But the big reason I tell people, if they have purchased my marketing book before 1970 or so, or 1980 or 90, I say, keep using it, but it's not going to help you, because we have a revolution occurring, and that is called the digital and social revolution, that we may not even see much of a need for 30-second commercials in the future, that we will know about, we'll have so much data on individual customers that we can actually reach them and customize for them and personalize to them if we want. Now, I'm going to qualify that. It's not happening that fast, but you got to get into digital thinking increasingly. But I'm now predicting the next stage is that your company needs to show that it cares about society as well as about making money. It's wonderful that you're in the business, you're an engine for making money, but you may have to recognize what's happening to the environment and immigration and infrastructure. You don't want to be in a country that has a lot of good things that you make, but the infrastructure means that there's hardly any traffic moving on the roads because insufficient roads, whatever. So I think companies are going to have to think more broadly about the society and their contribution to society. Now, by the way, typically we left that to come to government. Typically, the role of government is to make good infrastructure, a good environment, a good ecosystem, and so on and so forth, but government seems to be not doing the job anymore. In my country, we are so tied up and polarized that it's doing nothing for us. That's another reason business has to start incorporating social thinking as well. Now, and common good thinking. Let's move on. So if someone asks me, what is marketing all about? Years ago, I would have easily said it's a set of functions and skills in advertising, sales force, and price, all devoted to increasing demand. Okay, and that's true. I think that is not enough to say. So I will go further and say, well, marketing should be seen as a process of creating, communicating, and delivering superior value. CCDV, creating, communicating, and delivering superior value, V, to a target market, TM, target market. So if you keep remembering CCDV and TM, you have the picture. And the TM, it doesn't mean there's only one target market. You may be running several markets, but the plan should be for a target market and another plan for another target market. Now let me tell you what I mean using McDonald's. McDonald's has a brand, pretty good brand overall, but they need to sort of sub-brand the place for teenagers. That is, they need to know how to get more teenagers choosing McDonald's instead of a Pizza House or a Wendy's or something. They have to have a separate target market of senior citizens. And then the mother with children. Should she go to McDonald's for the kid or for herself? So in a sense, a company has to each have a plan for each target market within the larger population that they're serving. Now, the latest view, the one I like to say is real marketing, is if I ran a company, I would say, well, we use marketing to be our engine for growth. Now, I know that just get some new technology, and that may be your growth basis. This new technology may help you grow very fast. But I'm saying that it's the marketing people who are in touch with the buyers, who are seeing what's out there, what's stopping customers from buying, what is getting customers to buy, what customers really want in the future. And they have so much. If you can organize your marketing people who are out in the field and your salespeople, you'll get so many growth ideas that I would depend on marketing to be your foundation for growing the business. Okay, moving on. Here are the major components of today's marketing. I'm not talking yet about tomorrow's marketing. So the first is that your orientation is about buyers' needs and satisfying or even delighting people, if you can, to satisfy those needs. And then you talk about the products afterwards. Then there's a thing we call the 4 Ps. And it turns out that it doesn't have to be 4. It's product. And by the way, it means you, in your plan, you say what you're doing for the product idea for the next year. And then what you're doing for the pricing of the product. And what you're doing for the placing of it. What channels will the product be available to buy in? And finally, the promotion. The whole promotion package to get people to know and want your product. The 4 Ps. Now, someone will say, but where is packaging? Isn't that a 5th P? Yes, call it that if you want. When I say the product is made up of packaging too, yes, but if you're a perfume company, the packaging is really the bottle, and the bottle is part of the reason you grab that perfume. So if packaging is in a stage of being important and changing new ideas, put that in your plan. What about the sales force? Sales force doesn't begin with a P. Well, it doesn't have to. We put it under promotion. It's another promotion tool. But I don't care. Have a section on the sales force, definitely in your plan. So don't be held up by the 4 Ps. They're just the beginning. Then the next important idea is segmentation, targeting, and positioning, STP. Namely, any market you're going to start with is made up of groups. And you better segment the groups demographically, economically, educationally, health-wise. And maybe you'll end up not being Coca-Cola, by the way, does its own segmentations. But they want Coke to be bought by everyone here. But they're still working with specific segments that they will drive the idea of their brand to different segments. Okay, now the process can be represented by this thing that looks like an equation. It's not an equation, it's just a set of steps. So the first step I call MR. I think you know how all good marketing starts, with research, marketing research. You don't go blindly into a market. Get some data on the customers and their views of whether they're satisfied now or have some needs you could satisfy. Now, we could talk, of course, about focus groups and surveys, polling, all that. We won't get into that, but there's a lot of good marketing research methodologies to understand the market. That very collection of information will lead you to segmentation, targeting, and positioning, okay? Now you're at a point of choosing the target market, the TM. See, you've done the segmentation, targeting, positioning to learn which target would be a profitable target for you to tackle. So you got a target market. And what you want to do is a VP. What should your value proposition be for that target market? That's a key idea. Disney, their value proposition is family entertainment. Best family entertainment, something like that. In a very few words, a word or a few words, you put down the promise you're making to the buyers that you're in the business of being good and skilled at that. Now you got your TM and your VP, your target market and your value proposition, and you're ready to finish the marketing plan, MP. The marketing plan. Ready to go. You're ready to implement. That's the I. But the last thing must be this. I must collect information on whether people actually bought the product, how much product sold, and I need feedback. We call that C, control information. Now, when you implement the plan and get results, the C, if you're not satisfied with the results, work backwards to find out what went wrong, because it's very easy. Could it be implementation? Did you have a wonderful plan, but you didn't carry it out well? I just read a whole text on implementation and the problems that seem to happen when a good plan fails because of very bad, maybe the sales force wasn't well trained, or something else. If the implementation was good, maybe the marketing plan's mix, the mix of the 4 Ps or something wasn't a good mix. Maybe you didn't have the right value proposition. Maybe the target market was a stupid one to choose. See, you work backwards. Maybe you didn't segment the market right. You missed some real opportunities. And really goes back to very poor marketing research at the beginning. All right, that's all of you know this. It's just to remind you of the main premises of today's marketing. And then we should add one more thing that a lot of today's marketing includes the idea of expensive investments into 30-second commercials. And for those of you not doing television advertising, there's also the print advertising you're doing. If you're a grocery, you're going to every week show specials and so on. All right, let's move further. Now, part 3. We got to move into the future. What's going to be happening with marketing? First of all, the question is, does marketing need an update? Do you have to throw away your old book and buy my latest one, something like that? The answer is yes, but why? Consumers have changed. They are now in more control of everything. They can find out anything they want to know about you without having to assess it. You know, medical doctors tell their receptionists, don't let a salesperson in. Because I don't have the time to hear a 15-minute talk about that new pharmaceutical. Just have them leave a sample. And what's really happening is there's so much information about new drugs that's right on the internet that the doctor figures he could read what was said when he's got any questions in his mind. He doesn't need a sales talk. This is happening in lots of places. But consumers today are they're broadcasters. I mean, in a sense, if I'm on Facebook and saying a lot of things about even the products I prefer, my friends are reading that. So I'm doing word-of-mouth marketing. My friend will say, what car do you drive? And I say, I have a BMW, and I think it's great. It's enough. That's more important than a salesman saying that about a BMW. So the consumers are so knowledgeable. Distribution has changed. technology changed, geographical markets are changing, and competitors are changing. Now, FAAG, F is Facebook, A is Apple, another A is Amazon, and G is Google. Those are the big four, and I can add a few more. But you know, so much of our lives are being affected by those huge billionaire companies. Okay, have I convinced you that so much change has occurred with the digital addition in the world that we have to change too? Now, this actually could have been in the previous statement of what is today, but good for tomorrow as well. I'm very always interested in helping you know how to read a good account of customer behavior, because customer buying is what we're talking about. So this was written in Australia. I know Lyndon and Chris, they're father and son. Lyndon Brown, his father, and son. Now, the Australians are very good in marketing, and this book has a chapter on each of those black things around the circle. So let me read them. They may be too small to see. At the far right is what is called customer insight. So the question is, can you say that you have a good insight in why your target market customers buy? Now, don't show me that you have a lot of knowledge and facts about their ages and income and so on. That's good, but that isn't an insight. An insight is something about knowing psychologically why they might be wanting your product. So there's a whole chapter in their book on trying to get insight. And by the way, this 60% means that it's not 100%. This company, if this is a mapping of the level at which they're operating with customer insight, it's good, 60%, but there's more they could have really found out about the customer. Now that is followed by customer foresight. Very important. Not only should you know what triggers customers to buy now, but how are they changing into tomorrow? What is likely to be what they're like tomorrow? What's foresight? Customer foresight. We don't often think enough about how the customer is getting more knowledgeable and wanting more, expecting more, and so on. Then they do the same with a chapter on competitive insight. Do you know have you identified your competitors, and do you have insight into how they behave and what they're up to? And then they go on to customer foresight. What does it look like for each competitor, what they will be like tomorrow, and how they will respond to you for each competitor. If you were to lower your price or raise your price or come out with a new technical point you're making, how will they respond? So that's called competitive foresight. Then the next thing is a chapter on peripheral vision. Don't just look at your target market. Look around it. Have this peripheral vision. Look at adjacent markets adjacent to the one you're working on, because they could have a spillover effect. Open your mind to other factors that affect these factors. Then collaboration, and finally strategic alignment, separate chapters. So do I think this company, should I buy stock in this company if I trust these percentages? Yeah, this is a pretty good company. It has a position in each of these 8 dimensions or whatever number they are. And so, and this is not the only book. I love the books by Michael Solomon on customer behavior. They're very interesting to read, lots of stories. Michael Solomon is an American a master of the idea of buyer behavior. And then if you're really selling to companies, you have to read an entirely different literature. about how companies make decisions that are much more complex, and so many people get involved in buying their choice of the aircraft they're going to fly, or a big machine or a printing machine. So I'm not talking yet about business-to-business marketing. I was talking about business-to-consumer marketing. Okay, so let's move on. Now, I want to mention the new features in tomorrow's marketing, but it's happening now. It's started. I'm going to take each of these and say, add this to your thinking too. The first one is get into the social and digital world and operations and think of algorithms. Now, algorithms is affecting all of our lives. And an algorithm is a fancy word for a weighing process, a set of steps that weighs data, gives weights to data, and then makes a decision. I'll give you an example. Suppose you go to a bank and you're sitting with the banker and you say, I want a loan of $5,000. In the old days, he's the person who you're going to either be, he's going to reject you or give you $5,000. Today, he goes to his computer because the computer has an algorithm. And it's worked out carefully for the bank, where the algorithm uses the input of your information, your age, income, histories, and so on, and comes out with one of two things. Depends on the algorithm. Either a yes or no about the loan, or a probability statement that you will maybe repay. In other words, I would actually prefer to give me the probability that you will repay the $5,000. And if the probability is 10%, I'm not going to give you the loan. If it's 50%, I'm taking a risk to give you a loan. If it's 80%, I have a lot of confidence. So either you're getting a yes-no decision from the algorithm, or you're getting even a probabilistic statement of that. By the way, those of you who are if you have children applying for admission to a college, tell your daughter or son that all that information about that person is going to go into an algorithm that the college uses in accepting or rejecting students, which is a way to figure out if that student has a good fit to what that university offers. So our lives are now increasingly guided by algorithms, and you could actually not have to trust them. You know, the prisoner who was expecting to be released from prison and gets a no rejection from the algorithm says, I want to see the algorithm. I thought I was ready to be a free man again. Well, algorithms are very complicated. They're weighting structure. They're variables with weights. And sometimes a company that's been using an algorithm has to re-examine it too, that is not biased or prejudicial and things like that. So that's happening. Now, the algorithms are very useful for marketing automation. Do what you can to save labor of marketing work. Let me give you an illustration. Suppose you're going to do a very important email campaign, and you have data on everyone who's going to receive an email. And the email will not be one message. It will be a different message for each person. Given the person's characteristics, it's going to be one of 5 messages that email will have for that person. Not only that, I'm interested in stating when I want that email to open up in their iPhone. So you can imagine a big spreadsheet. So I basically want person X with his characteristics to receive message Y, which is on one of 5, at time Z, which is Thursday morning at 9:30. Not 9:40, 9:30, okay? Now you can imagine the handwork. that would go into doing this, it can be all done by just the digital process, just the layout of the rules and how to handle this. So that would mean I'd save a lot of work if I can automate a lot of my processes. Now, we find a concept that was not mentioned in previous textbooks very much, the concept of the customer journey. Isn't that the key idea? What is a customer, what happened to get that customer to us? We were lucky. He bought from us, he didn't go to the competitor. I want to ask that customer what steps he or she went through to choose us. And by the way, we should do that anyways. In a car company, if someone comes in to the dealership for a BMW, you should finally find out, how did that happen? Okay, the idea is there's not one journey in buying a car, for example. Let's say Mary's experience in buying her car was she saw an ad for a BMW and didn't do anything about it. She couldn't even tell you much about the company. Later, she sees a friend who has a BMW and they talk about it. She's not buying a car now. That's another thing that happened. And then she passed the dealership. She had a time on her hands and there was a dealership and she was curious about something. And she went in and got information, but she didn't buy. And then something else happened that she did go in again and she bought. All right, that's one prototype. That's one possible scenario that happened to Mary. I could imagine another person who says, I need a car, BMW, my friend has one, he's excited about it, I'll go in and I'll buy it. That's the shortest journey. Now, so here's the story. There could be several journeys. You don't say there's 1,000 types of journeys. There's prototype journeys for any product. And secondly, every journey normally has touch points. In other words, a touch point is just seeing an ad. Another is talking to the dealer, the car dealer. What you want to do is know the journeys that are the most likely journeys to get into your retail operation and the major touch points. And if you're not present at the touch points or badly present at the touch points, in other words, a bad dealer, I walked in wanting to buy a BMW and I was so turned off by that dealer. So you've got to be at the touch points that count with a positive, uplifting experience, not a deadening experience. So a lot of work is being done now by companies to reimagine the ways people end up buying from or how they end up journeying to the competitor's company. How come they bypassed you? Okay, another thing that happens is I said Mary ended up buying maybe a BMW, but Mary's only one type of woman. Maybe she's 35 years of age and she's well-educated, etc. Maybe there's Joan, who is a different kind of woman, maybe not one who goes to BMWs or whatever. So the concept of personas, there may be 5 types of people who buy from you something. And you give them names. And the reason is it helps the messaging. It helps the advertising creative people not just think there's a customer, TM is the target market, and that's thinking abstractly, but think about Mary versus Joan. Make your ad richer because you are imagining a typical kind of customer you've been seeking with a certain name and set of characteristics. Now, the next idea is we're doing much more with content development and distribution. Now, in the old days, that simply meant selling pitches, messages designed, buy now, 20% off. Sales-driven and sales-loaded messages. That's not what we're talking about. Right now, there's a lot more content being developed for your customers, which will please them. If you get, I'll give you an example. What if I know that a lot of my potential customers are in love with sports? Let's say the sport of basketball. And I even can tell you which of my customers are really watching every basketball game. And I noticed a very interesting article about one of the top players in basketball that I know my customer would be very interested in knowing about. So I sent him that article, and I say, George, I was thinking of you when I read this story, period. I was thinking of you. And it reminds me of how I got started in marketing, because what got me to use the Prentice Hall company as my publisher was the salesman was forever dropping notes to me. He knew my life and my interests, and that I was writing a book called Marketing Management. And I kept writing him thank you notes. I didn't know about that. He was actually not writing my book, but he was thinking of me, and I was very attached to him for that reason. So content marketing is about trying to develop content for different types of people that might warm up your relationship. It's warming up the relationship. Now, the other thing called influencer marketing is going to be loaded with some ethical questions. Here's what's happening. It's one thing, word of mouth is just one thing, where I just tell you in an excited way about a car that I like, a BMW, let's say. And I'm not expecting you to pay me or anything. I'm just sharing word of mouth information. But now we have identified some people who have a lot of followers. Now that's the result of Facebook and the digital world. Do you know a very top singer or athlete will have maybe 1 million followers? So the idea was, if that person with 1 million followers might post a message to their followers, because that person is always trying to keep their followers interested in their lives, and post something about the Tesla car or the Mercedes car, that's worth its weight in gold, that the fans of this person, in adulating the star, will be influenced to be thinking of the car that the star has just posted something about favorably. So that's how it started. And in fact, maybe it started with someone approaching a star and saying, for every time you post something about our product, we'll give you X dollars. Okay, now that has moved now to what we call micro influencers. A micro influencer is estimated to be someone with about 15,000 followers. It's a more local setting, but it's important because it may be in the city of Chicago, 15,000 followers, and it may be about a brand of toothpaste or perfume or whatever. And now companies have gone to collect some people who have that level of followers and to pay them when they see the posting. And so, and by the way, it will be related to how good the posting is. It's almost as if the posting was done by the company and not by the influencer. The influencer, in the most crass way, may say, I'm willing to be paid. Just compose for me the kind of posting I should, and what I should say about why I like the product. I don't know if you know this, but who was the guy advertising Pepsi-Cola so many years ago? He didn't even like the drink, but he was paid handsomely for saying he drinks Pepsi-Cola.
So the point is, this could be a bad thing happening in the marketing world, that it's manipulating the influence that's coming to us. Now there's even a thing called the nano poster, the nano influencer, 5,000 followers. 5,000 followers. In fact, one company told me that 80% of their budget is being spent on influencers. People paid to post. Okay. So whether you want to use it or not, you should know about it happening. Now, omni-channel marketing is maybe just a set of fancier words for what we call channels of distribution. Two things. One is that there's always newer channels to get your message out on. One of them, for example, who would ever think that a food producer would be in a channel that has messages for people stopping at gas stations about their food? Or would put out would tell gas stations, mobile gas stations, to show a point of purchase display about a certain ice cream brand. Because all of a sudden, we're buying a lot of our food when we stop at a gas station, whether it's milk or ice cream. So basically, one point is that a lot of new channels appear. Secondly, there's a problem of being consistent in branding in the different channels. I'll show you what I mean. You better price consistently. You don't want Coca-Cola to be known to sell for X in one of your channels and for half X in another channel. Then you're going to drive all the people to the other channel. So, and just what you say about yourself, you have to really get consistency in the many channels that you go through. I'm going to say something about this interesting concept of lean marketing later when I talk about developing new products, but we'll wait on that one. Cause marketing goes back, and I'm going to say more about it, but it's basically, do you have a cause beyond your product that you care about as a company? Are you telling people to not throw away their plastic in the water? Are you aware that there's a water shortage in many parts of the world, and we should be really conserving water? Coca-Cola knows that, by the way. No water, no Coke. And Coca-Cola is one of the best companies getting a lot of people to think about water and keeping it available and fresh and all that. So should your company do something for society as well? And what kind of cause? Now, we worry about the following. It's called green keeping. I forget what it's called. When some company wants to look environmental and sound like a serious environmental firm, and there's statements they make, but there's nothing going on. It's camouflage. So we worry about that. But let's move on. And this I've already discussed, that you got to look at the process, the journey that the customer goes through to buy a product like a car. And now, is your company into digital, and have you gone far enough? So let's raise some questions. And by the way, look at these and really go back to your company and have your company people score themselves on where they think they stand. Have you hired enough people with digital skills? In other words, you obviously didn't have the digital skills if it's an established company and you haven't been hiring the new, you're either a digital native or not. You need a digital native. You need someone who grew up with coding and other things and Facebook. have you gone into big data? Are you collecting data? Now, that's another ethical area because companies are able to know so much about us. You know, I have this phone called Alexis. Alexis, I could say, Alexis, play for me Bach's something from Mozart. I think Alexis is listening to me all the time. There's a worry about that. Also, when I shop, every supermarket, my supermarket knows what I tend to buy. There's even a case recently, this surprised me, but the Amazon company has just come out with a new microwave oven. I don't know why they're making their own oven. They're going to try to make their own iPhone and everything else and sell us everything else. In fact, you can buy a home from Amazon now. Amazon is in the home business. But a microwave oven, this one that they made takes your voice. Pizza. You say pizza, and you say pizza 5 minutes. So you know that you don't press buttons. So it's using the new, there's more and more use of voice now in the operation of equipment. I think the microwave oven is listening to me, like Alexis. If they understand my saying pizza, I think they're recording a lot more. So that's the problem. And everything we do is recorded somewhere. So privacy is a huge concern. And I never thought that as a marketer I would start questioning our marketing. And here's the dialogue. Here's the question. When we first talked about big data, we told consumers, this is for your good. The more I know about you, the less I will interrupt you. Because instead of doing mass marketing and having you sit watching a 30-second commercial, you wouldn't have to see it because I know who's going to buy that kind of car. So in other words, you would only get the messages about things that they know you would be interested in buying. But it's not happening. We're still getting messages for selling us things we have no interest in. So the idea was you should accept the fact that we had a lot of data about you, but really worry is that it's there to manipulate you, not just to inform you. And I'm even beginning to see in Google, some of Google's very workers are trying to police the situation from getting out of hand. They themselves are uncomfortable with how much Google really knows. And Facebook has some of that happening too. So here, big data, and I've been pushing you to collect big data and to also collect the methods of analyzing big data. And this is called, see, the data has to, you need what we call analytics. You need a data scientist. Today, the marketing group needs a data scientist to make sure that qualified, high-quality data is being collected. And the idea is we will have routines that will look through the data, and if they're really good routines, you know what it's going to produce? The magic word is customer insight. That the machine will come up with a customer insight by scanning the data. All right, have you carried out trials with Facebook, Google, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn? Now, let me share a story with you. Procter & Gamble had reached a point where they were spending something like 30% of their advertising money, their marketing money, on digital data. and digital work with Facebook and so on. So 30% is means a serious wanting to get into the digital world. The interesting thing is, then I saw an announcement that they were down from 30% to about 20%. So my first impression was, boy, they overpaid. They didn't find that digital work was yielding enough results. No, that was the wrong interpretation. The right interpretation is, by doing 30% with Facebook and Instagram and so on, they learn what works, and they stopped using what didn't work. So falling from 30% use of digital to 20% was because now they found out the 20% that really works. So watch for that. You're going to have to overspend just to learn what works. Now, I want you to do both traditional and digital. It's not acceptable to only do traditional because they work together. Because when the big ad, the 30-second commercial appears, what it does, it's trying to build a brand preference with you that will last and grow and get enriched over time. What the TV commercial is about is building a long-term relationship with you. What the digital is about is getting you to buy now something from you, getting you to buy something now. So be very careful about that. Now, they work together because every big commercial will have in it, for more information, see Facebook. See, it will maybe an email address. So there's a play between going from the commercial 30 seconds to the actual other one. Now, when you tell me that your company is digital, I want to distinguish 4 cases we've discovered. There are people who say they're not digital and they're proud of not being digital. They're deniers. They don't think it's important to be digital. Namely, everything they've done in their marketing works. It has been working. So they're deniers. And maybe for a while it will be enough. Then there's the avoiders who say, I should do it, but I haven't done it yet. It takes a little time. A camouflager is the kind of company that shows signs that they're into it. They're into it. They want you to realize that you should respect them. They've gone digital, but they're not that serious about it. And finally, the transformer is the one that has put a lot of work, and they're using digital very much. So I don't know where you're at, but you might ask these questions. Let's ask this. How can you use digital in more ways? Establish a website and build a large customer database, and where at least people who want to know more about you, and maybe you're keeping them current about what's happening in that category, and it's your blogging or it's your website. Buy customer information that tracks the interests of patterns of specific kinds of consumers. In other words, that's all about making sure that you're buying some big data and you're mining your data. You have to have the tools to mine the data. Encourage consumers to suggest how to improve their products and services. You know, I would think that every restaurant ought to interview me after I finished my meal. Now, maybe they don't have to if they see the plate is full of the food that I ordered and I didn't eat anything. That itself tells them that I wasn't a happy customer. But Starbucks has a system asking its coffee drinkers, how can we improve Starbucks? You notice that? I mean, they get thousands and thousands of points made by consumers to how the experience. And remember, Starbucks is not just coffee, it is a coffee experience. And they want that experience to get better and better. So what are you doing to get your customers to be your consultants on how to improve your business? And then offer coupons sometimes, or samples, so people could try out your product. And also, try to see whether you're talked about on the internet. I mean, are you ever mentioned? And if you're mentioned by word of mouth, are good things being said about you or bad things? And can you catch the bad things and correct those? Do something about it fast. In other words, there's so much, we call this social talk. There's so much social talk. And the question is, should you be monitoring the social talk? Now, I'm going to make another point that has to do more with business strategy than only marketing strategy. And this is the question about how you grow your company. Because every company wants growth. And one way to grow is by mergers and acquisitions. In other words, if you have no ideas for growth, buy another company that complements what you're doing and takes you into more of a larger company. Or you do organic growth. Organic growth is you grow yourself. You grow by being alert. Some findings are that organic growth beats mergers and acquisitions growth. And that doesn't mean you should never acquire another company, but the findings are that over 50% of the acquisitions fail. They don't reach the goals set for the acquisition. For so many reasons. When you acquire another company, you want them to change their ways to your ways. But it was their ways that made you buy them. You bought them because they had a way of operating that was impressive, and you tried to change that. Or they just lost some dignities and some feeling of self-respect by being acquired. Whatever it is, one of the authorities on this is Michael Porter's work. Michael Porter from Harvard has come out with data showing that so many mergers and acquisitions are failures. So marketing and innovation leadership, cooperation with marketing and other functional departments, reallocating your money to the best products under development, and then optimizing what you're doing. All of those things point to organic-centered marketing as the way to grow. Now, I'm going to share with you something from my book, Marketing 4.0, which if you read, you will be reminded of this. I have a system in the book that's called the 5 A's. It's just a staging. It didn't have to be 5 words with A, but the first job you have is to get someone to be aware of you as a company. They know that you're a company making something. But it should be more than that, that there's something appealing about the company. Now, even those 2 stages lead to the customer maybe getting curious enough to ask some questions, which you should be prepared to answer. And then if they are satisfied with the answers, they will act, they will buy the product. And then if they're really satisfied with the product, they're going to buy it again, which means you're turning someone into a longer-term customer. All right, now working with the 5 A's, the book shows you that there's a effort to move from one stage to the next stage. You're not going to get a person to go from being aware to being a huge fan of your business. From aware to, you do it in 2 stages. So one stage is, what can we do to get more than awareness, to be appealing to the customer? Well, the work that you have to do is called branding work and marketing communication work. But what do I have to do to move a customer from finding us appealing to asking more questions? Well, we use social group and social media marketing. That is, we get on Facebook and so on, and we get that done. And then what do we do to go from asking to acting? Well, it's having the right channels, the right sales messages, and so on and so forth. And then the big job of getting someone to continue to be wanting to buy from the same company, all the way to becoming what we call the goal you have is to create advocates. The highest goal is to get people who will only buy from you and talk about you favorably. Now that brings up a concept which you know about, or should, called the Net Promotion Score. Net Promotion Score. You could ask this question of a customer. Do you ever talk about our product to friends or others? And if he says, I not only do that, I love your product, and I'm almost continuously just bragging about buying from you. Well, that's a number 10. There's nothing better than that. That guy is really promoting us. If he says, I've never talked about it, but I'd be comfortable telling others, that's a number 9. I might try to do that because I am a fan. That's an 8. So what you want to know is, do you have any people who do talk about you favorably to others? And you get a score out of that. By the way, if you want to read the details, just go to Wikipedia. They have an article on the Net Promotion Score. And you would like a pretty good score on net promotion if possible. That means there's a lot of, you have some people who love you as a company and they talk about you favorably. In fact, another word for being an advocate at that level is to be a brand ambassador. You could even have a program creating brand ambassadors, in a sense. Okay. Now, I would like to get into this other question. Remember that not only should you have good marketing, but good innovation. So I want to talk about, are you doing innovation work? Now, the innovation work is to be done by your development people, sometimes engineers and chemists and others, depending on the business. And that's where I use the phrase, these are technical people who are masters of what's possible. They can dream up new product or service offerings. But they should be working with you, the marketers, who are masters of the valuable. So the question I'm going to ask now is, here's the worst case. You're a firm that leaves product development up to the engineers or chemists without ever talking to the marketing people, because the marketing people are there just to sell whatever you come out with. Good marketing is having the ability to sell whatever you make. That's the worst relationship. There's no relationship, because I want the team to have a marketer on the team during the development who brings in information about what customers think of each point involved in the features of this new product. Okay, so I hope, what are the reported levels of engagement between development and marketing in your business? Now remember, these are two groups that think a different language. Engineers talk a very different language than marketing people. Engineers see things as black or white. They are very precise. Marketing is much more nuanced and subtle. And if you can get your engineers to think marketing more sophisticated way, it's going to be very, very good. Then the two groups can talk a similar language. And the marketers should know more about engineers. what are the possible contributions of marketing at each stage, because you know when you're developing a product, you're going through a whole set of stages from just an idea. In fact, I'll show you the stages in a moment. And what steps can the company take to improve the relationship between development and marketing? Now, here's what you want to end up with as a company. Hopefully, you have some things at the bottom, some projects that are small-scale projects that are going to lead to some improvement in what you make. It's incremental. And I'll tell you who's so good at that. Japanese companies are so good at improving everything all the time. They don't just make a good product. They are always thinking how to make it better. That's not breakthrough thinking. The Japanese may be good or not good at a breakthrough. I'm talking about something called Kaizen, and just making things better as you move along with your firm. Continuous improvement. Now, I hope you have some portfolio, some ventures that will be really new things that you're going to make. And then maybe your firm is playing around with a very big idea, a flying taxi cab company. Flying taxi cabs. Now, I'm not saying that is a reasonable thing to go for, but do you have any big idea? You don't want to bet the firm on a big idea. Be careful to bet the whole firm on one big idea. But I think I congratulate you just because you're doing continuous product improvement, and you have some other projects. But let me say that as far as the staging that a new product goes through in development, I would like your company to say to me that you do have a person in each of these positions. And this is from a book I wrote called Winning at Innovation. Do you have someone in your firm who you could call an activator? Now, you'll know that person. That's a person who is always kind of crazy about new ideas. You don't try to discourage that person at all. This is a person who gets excited and comes to other people in the company and says, how about this? How about that? Now, if you don't have such a person, where's your ideas going to come from? And by the way, you shouldn't have only one such person. Maybe there's a couple of guys who are always dreamers. It's a certain type of personality. Now, take any of the ideas he has come up with, throw away most of them that don't look at all interesting, but take any one and go to have a person who is very good at browsing. Now, a browser is someone who could take this idea and research it. Are there other companies already making that kind of product or service? If the browsers find out that this is not a new idea, well, you're saving a lot of money by not following something and later learning that it's not a new idea. Then, if it's still a good idea, you're ready to turn it over to your creative people who will start imagining the physical look of the product. They may sketch it. They may show it to some other people, to some consumers. They're sketching it out. And the sketches will get better and better. And then, basically, the question is going to be gone. If everything is positive, you got to put it under development. Now you actually make the product. You build the factory. You really made something that looks like it's ready to be a winner. And then you execute, because that's the marketing function. Marketing now takes that new product and goes out selling it. And of course, in the background, because there's been a lot of cost, are the financial people. Hopefully they were choosing good products to put money on. Okay, so that process is spelled out very carefully. And lean marketing. I told you I was going to get to that, and I'm very impressed with a fellow named Eric Ries, who says, if you're going to develop a new product, please do not make it perfect. Don't aim initially to make the perfect product, because you've done no learning about it yet. Make a minimum viable product that you could sort of test out and take out and try to sell. A minimum viable product. And add to it a minimum viable approach. In other words, the amount of advertising money and the number of salespeople. You're keeping down your cost so you could learn and fail fast. So the mantra is, if you're going to fail, you want to fail fast, cut your losses. So there's a whole philosophy of doing it this way rather than spending 5 years making this perfect thing, and only to find out people think it's too pricey, they don't want to buy it. Okay. Now, by the way, everyone, I want you to meet we're going to be moving into questions and answers. So I turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you all for being here.
Okay.